Report. I'm Amy Goodman. A coalition of immigration and civil rights groups has filed a complaint alleging widespread and systemic abuse of migrant children by U.S. Customs and Border Protection. Organizations including the National Immigrant Justice Center and the ACLU say they're acting on behalf of over 100 unaccompanied children mistreated by border agents after crossing into the United States. So far in 2014, U.S. Customs and Border Protection reports over 47,000 unaccompanied children have been detained after crossing the border, almost double the number for all of 2013, almost 5 times the number from 2009. President Obama has described the situation as a humanitarian crisis. A number of the children have been detained in shocking conditions. Over 1,000 children are reportedly being held at a warehouse in Nogales, Arizona, some sleeping in plastic containers. On Thursday, the Washington Post posted video showing makeshift holding areas for detained migrants at the McAllen, Texas Border Patrol station. The video shows dozens of women and children sprawled on concrete floors. Earlier this week, Democracy Now!'s Nermeen Sheikh and I spoke to 2 guests about the plight of these migrant children. In Houston, Jose Luis Zelaya, who fled Honduras in 2000 at the age of 13 in search of his mother. He traveled unaccompanied through Central America and finally reached Texas 4 months later. Zelaya is now a Ph.D. student at Texas A&M in the Department of Education, part of the Council for Minority Student Affairs at Texas A&M, and a member of the immigrant rights groups United We Dream. We also spoke to Sonia Nazario in Los Angeles. She's a Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist, author of Enrique's Journey, the story of a boy's dangerous odyssey to reunite with his mother. I started by asking Sonia Nazario about the number of migrant children being warehoused in the United States right now.
Well, this surge, as it's called, really started in 2011. We've seen over the last 3 years a 10-fold increase in the number of children coming here unaccompanied, unlawfully, and being placed in federal custody. And that doesn't even count the Mexican children, nearly 20,000 of those additionally, who are deported within 24, 48 hours. These are mostly children from Central America, from Honduras, El Salvador, Guatemala, and there's just been this enormous surge. Last month, in one day, we saw 1,000 children placed in federal custody, and on average, 400 children are arriving every single day. And again, the federal government has seen itself completely unprepared for this surge, which, 2 years ago we had a surge, and they opened Lackland Air Force Base for a couple of months and got caught with their pants down, and now again we're seeing the same problem.
And Sonia Nazario, you've actually characterized this problem as a refugee crisis. What do you think the federal government should be doing to cope with these numbers of children migrants coming to the U.S.?
Well, when I started looking at this and made the journey on top of these trains through Mexico myself to document what these children coming here alone, really a majority of these kids were coming to either work, flee abusive situations with their families in their home countries, or the vast majority were coming to reunify, in many cases with a mother who had left them behind in their home countries, moms who had come, single mothers by the millions to the United States and left their children behind with an aunt, a grandmother saying it'll be a year or two. Life here turned much more difficult than they thought it would be, and these separations stretched into 5 or 10 years or even more. And like the boy that I wrote about, Enrique, they despair of seeing their parents again, their moms again, and they would set off on their own to come and find them and make this very dangerous journey. So now, though, in the last few years, there's been this huge surge in violence in countries like Honduras has the highest homicide rate in the world. 30% of the population has been extorted by gangs or the cartels. And what you see in these neighborhoods, like Enrique's neighborhood, is, 6 in 10 kids. The surveys by UNHCR and others in the region are finding 6 in 10 children are fleeing for their very lives. Kids are no longer, in many instances, even going to school. They've had their parents or other family members murdered by these gangs. And someone yesterday with the Women's Refugee Commission said, this is no different than child soldiers in Africa, and we treat those children like refugees. Why would we not extend the same kind of treatment to children who are coming from vulnerable children from our neighbors to the south. Why would we not treat these children in this same way? And so I think the government really needs to step up its game, and both in terms of getting these kids out of Border Patrol facilities more quickly. They're supposed to do this within 72 hours, and they're not. And these are not places where children should spend long periods of time. There's no shower. There's an open toilet. Often they're having to take turns sleeping on the floor because there's not enough space. They should have prepared more shelters and been prepared for this surge, so there would be some place to put these kids. And I think they do need to be treating them more like refugees, screening these children for this kind of treatment. And finally, I think the government needs to provide attorneys to every single one of these children. These kids go, when they're apprehended, they are released usually to a guardian or a parent and then ordered to go to immigration court, but they're not entitled to any kind of public defender. And so when they stand before that immigration judge, I've seen very young children, 7 years old, 8 years old, 9 years old. Others have seen kids as young as 5 being asked to present these complex immigration cases before a judge. The government has an attorney who's arguing why that child should be hurtled back to these very dangerous circumstances, but these children don't have any advocate by their side. And this is not due process. I think we measure a country by how we treat children, and we're asking these children to do the impossible, which is to defend their right to be here. Not all of them should be able to stay, but we should give them due process. And what Eric Holder has done by assigning 100 attorneys and paralegals to do this is, you know, a good first step, but really symbolic. He needs to really step it up and get a lot more attorneys involved.
Jose Luis Zelaya, tell us your story. How did you come to the United States? When did you come? How old were you?
Yes, good morning. Well, I was actually born in Honduras, and actually in San Pedro Sula, which is the capital of violence in the world. And as a child, I grew up in extreme poverty. I literally witnessed my brother dying in my mom's arms because we didn't have money to take him to the hospital. An abusive father, an alcoholic man who used to beat my mother in public, who used to beat me and prevented me from going to an education, literally separated me from my mother. My mother ran away from him with my younger sister to the United States, and he kept me behind. He forced me to stay behind so that I can provide for alcohol for him. My mother migrated to the United States, and I stayed in Honduras for about 2 years without her, and my father kicked me out of the house, and I became homeless. I became a street child. But this is the reality that children experience in the streets of Honduras. I digged into trash cans to eat food. I shined people's shoes at parks. I sold candies at light intersections. I cleaned windshields in order to provide for myself. But the reality is that it's a very dangerous place. Honduras is a very dangerous country. Once I was simply playing soccer, and there was a drive-by shooting. And during the soccer game, I ended up being shot twice in both of my arms. And it was then when I made the decision that I needed to run away. I needed to leave Honduras and come to the United States to find my mother. I didn't know where she was. All I knew was the area code 713, which was the Houston area code. And I came to the United States. It took me 45 days to come. It was horrible. It is the worst experience that I have ever witnessed, to be thirsty and not have water, to be hungry and not have food. Not even a trash can to be able to find food was available in the desert. Whenever you're riding the train and you see people lose their lives, you see little girls being physically abused by the coyotes, and you can't do anything because you're a child. I was 13 years old when I came. I wasn't trying to break the law. I was trying to fulfill the law by trying to reunite with my mother, by trying to reunite with my sister. And when I came to the United States, I was actually in a detention center as well, in Harlingen, Texas. And the experience there were very difficult. We were only allowed to see the sunlight 1 hour a week, and we were only allowed to drink water 3 times a day. And these are difficult situations because these are children, and I understand why these children migrated to the United States.
This, Jose Luis Zelaya, is in a children's center in the United States. You could see sunlight once a week, water 3 times a day.
This is what I experienced when I was a child at a detention center in Harlingen, Texas, correct.
Jose Luis Zelaya, who fled Honduras at the age of 13 in search of his mother. He's now a Ph.D. student at Texas A&M. Also speaking to Sonia Nazario, Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist and author of Enrique's Story, the story of a boy's dangerous odyssey to reunite with his mother. To hear that story and more from Juan, we'll be back in a minute.